In this tutorial, I want to look at some of the paint tools in Gimp. I'm using Gimp 2.10.20. So I'm going to look at these ones. I'm going to look at Paintbrush, pencil, Airbrush, ink, and my Paintbrush. Okay, now when you choose, I'll start with the paintbrush. When you choose the paintbrush, you see the name will be shown here. You have the modes. You can choose either normal or whatever modes. These modes are similar to the modes that you use when you are in layers. There are also modes here that you can choose from. Now if it's the normal one, let's see here, you also always choose a brush, because the brush, it's like in normal life. When you have paint brushes, you have those that are hard, you have soft, and also you have those a brush that's the width is high and small for corners. It's the same thing. Look at the brushes that Gimp offers. You can also import other brushes into this in here as well. Now I will not do that now. I'll do that in another video, but now let's look at how to use the brushes generally and with all the options. So let's say we choose this option as it is here. Now the size, if you see here, this is the size. The circle there shows you the size. If I increase it, I will get a different size. Now I can go back to the default and press here, and I get the same thing. The next thing is the aspect ratio. The aspect ratio is it's with respect to the height and the width of whatever you will be the brush that you've taken. Now the aspect ratio, when it's 0, nothing happens, because it's like a circle more or less. If you let's say I increase the aspect ratio, now you see that now this is how it's behaving. When I go to the right, it's like this. When I come down, it's like that, because when it depends, aspect ratios depends on the height and on the width. When I go to the left, it gives me an opposite thing. When I come down, it's like this, and like this, it's like that. That's the left negative, the right positive, and then you can set it to 0, where it's always like this, and because it's not changing, because it's like a circle more or less. Now when you have an aspect ratio, it's visible to see the angle of the thing as well. So let's see here, the angle is 0 now. If I draw it like this, when I increase the angle a bit, you see it has rotated a bit. That's how the angle. So you have to play with it, and depending on what you want to do. And talking about spacing, if you see that this has no space, because I've changed them to the original thing. Now if I increase the spacing, you see it gives us some space. Now the hardness is how the edges will look like, whether it will be like it's blurred at the edges or not. There's some softness at the edges when you reduce the hardness. So let's reduce our hardness a bit here, and then you see if I put the spacing to the default that it came, you see it's a bit blurred. When I increase the hardness here, you see that it's not blurred at the edges. Normally it depends on what you are doing. If you have a photo that you want to do something, sometimes it's better to put the blur so that it transitions nicely, but it depends, because in case I want to draw this one here, you saw that this makes it a bit too small. I don't see anything when I reduce the hardness. Now the force, let's look at the force. The force is similar to when you are writing with a pencil. The more you press your hand, the darker it is. If you write lightly and you don't press your hand, it's a bit light. So let's see here, when I increase the force, you see this when I reduce the force, you see this it acts like a normal pencil thing. Now there is this dynamics here that you can choose. First of all, let me talk about the mode a bit. You see the mode here, you can choose other things. Even in the mode, you have eraser in. So if I change this to eraser, it will be an eraser for me to clean rather than for me to draw. You can also change it to any other thing, and then you can use it depending on, for example, screen. I should have if I have normally for the screen, if I have a, let me see here, I create one where I have the transparency as background. Let me create a layer that I have transparency as the background, and so it's on there. I think then the screen works. It depends, you see. It needs some transparency before that one will work. So that you have to look through it, as many options that you can use. Now I go to normal again. You can also have, we have the dynamics. With the dynamics now, we had everything I've done is the dynamics is off, but you can also use, for example, if I use confetti as the dynamic, now you see what I get here. So you can go through them and do whatever you like. I go back to node dynamics off. Now apply jitter. You can also apply jitter to your thing. If, for example, if I have this, and now if I apply a jitter to it, you see it gives me this. I can also use you can also use smooth strokes. You can adjust it, lock the brush. You can lock the brush such that, let's see here now, if I draw, let's say I change this to the star brush and I draw something like this. Now if I lock my brush, let's see, the keep brush appearance fixed relative to the view. So if I, for example, go to view and then I do some zoom, like I zoom, let's zoom out, for example, to make it small, you see that it's relative to it. So it's because this is small, now this one looks bigger, but if I were to remove it, it will be the same as this one here. Even though I did my zoom, I can now go back again and zoom in again for you to see more. Okay, now the next thing is, yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to talk about. And the next thing is the pencil. The pencil is similar to the paintbrush. It has the same entries, it works the same. The only difference is that with the pencil you don't get these blurs when you it's totally hard. It's like you don't get blurs at the edges. So if I were to let's change to our brush here that we're working with, the pencil doesn't actually give normally blurs when you use it. It's, let's see, that it's always like you don't get any. Let's reduce it and see whether we'll get some blurs. You see, still, even how much I've reduced it, the blur, there's no blurriness or I do smoothness at the edges. So that's more or less the difference between the pencil and the paintbrush. They work more or less the same. The airbrush, if we pick the airbrush, you see, as normal airbrushes, they're a bit lighter because they are, but the entries and how you adjust them are similar. And then let's go to the ink. The ink is like you can imagine it as using ink. If you have an ink, if you start drawing and you have three options, you can start with, if you want zeros, you want circles or squares or diamonds. But you see that it's like if I press my hand more and leave my hand there, you see that it's flowing. It's like if you can imagine you drawing with an ink, it can be a bit like you have to be careful. It's not like a pencil or something like that, but you can increase the size as well, like all the other things, and adjust it more or less. I forgot to talk about the opacity. Now the opacity, if you reduce the opacity, you see here it becomes lighter. If I increase the opacity, it becomes darker a bit than normal. So the opacity, if the opacity is 100, you get this. It's the same with all the other tools as well. If you see the pencil, when I wanted to talk about skipped paint, this was the color I had. If I push it up a bit, you see that it becomes as dark as, so it depends on the opacity as well. Yeah, and the last one that I'm going to look at is my paintbrush. My paintbrush, I close this because this is I've overdone it, and I close maybe this so I get a new thing for us to look. The paintbrush, my paintbrush is something that has many types of brushes that it customized more or less. You can choose this, and let's see here, am I on this layer? Yes, I have to come to this layer. You can choose this. Let me increase the opacity so that you can see well. If I go, you see, you can choose whichever. They have many things in many different kinds of brushes, and incredible different kinds of brushes that you can play with to draw your things nicely. You can erase with this brush. If you choose that, instead of you drawing now, you can erase with the brush. You understand? You can this will give you no eraser effects. You can also increase the radius, the hardness, the base opacity. So this is how these brushes or tools or paint tools work. Thank you for watching. Please help me by subscribing to my channel. If this helped you in any way, please give me a like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.